The Data-Driven Restaurant, a webinar from Nation's Restaurant News Intelligence. I'm Christy Ravnenberg, and I lead our Nation's Restaurant News Intelligence team, the research and insights arm of Nation's Restaurant News. I'm joined here by my colleague and co-author on this study, Mark Brando. He is our Associate Director of Research and Insights. Welcome, Mark. It's going to be a fun one today. So we'll start with a few little housekeeping items. On your screen, you can see a little info if you're having any technical issues. And throughout the broadcast, you can enter questions into the Q&A widget. Those will not be visible to all the attendees. They'll go directly to our panelists and producers on the back end. We'll sort through those and get to as many as we can in the second half of the webinar. Also joining Mark and me today will be an expert panel from our sponsors on this report, Olo, Thanks, Para Technology, and Axial Shift. And we'll introduce to them again a little bit later and get into some strategies that you can take back to your businesses. Format for today, Mark and I will walk through the highlights of our study, the Data-Driven Restaurant, which surveyed nearly 400 restaurant operators on how they're collecting, storing, analyzing, integrating their data, and crucially, turning it into actionable strategy, or in a lot of cases, not. We're going to talk about those challenges and pain points too. So let's dive right in. So the first thing we learned in this survey is data confidence and data quality are highly, highly linked. This survey itself was born out of one data point from a survey we did a year ago on a broader technology outlook. I know, Mark, this is one of my favorite stats last year. I know we've talked in depth about this. They told us about a year ago, 7 out of 10 operators said they were not confident that they were optimizing their customer data. And we really wanted to get under the surface and figure out why that was, what the barriers were. Was that true for everyone? Had anyone cracked the code on how to use data in their restaurants? So we'll start with that same question that gave birth to this whole idea for the Data-Driven Restaurant Report. And I'll stop for a moment to say this is an in-depth report that we released in late December based on this survey. If you haven't downloaded it already, go to nrn.com/data-driven-restaurant, one word, and you can download it for free there. That link will appear later at the end of the webinar on a slide as well if you missed it. So we asked this question again. If you look at the first two green slices on the right, you see more than half, or 55%, are feeling pretty good. I probably or definitely am optimizing the data I'm collecting in my businesses. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got 29%, so almost a third, who are just not feeling good about where they are. And then you have your possiblies that could really swing either way, but you can see we have a pretty good chunk of confidence on one end, but then a lot of people who are just not there yet. Zooming out a little bit, we take that 25% who said definitely, and then you've got 3 out of 4 who have at least some level of uncertainty about how they're using data. And so what we did for the purposes of this report and for this webinar is we wanted to dive into those definitelys, that 25% who are really confident, a little more data savvy, kind of out ahead of the curve. So we basically created a persona for them, and you'll see them referred to in this report as data optimizers. And we use them as a benchmark throughout the report to see what they're doing differently, what they have in common, and what the average operator can learn. And one interesting point, as I mentioned, since we first were spurred to explore this on a stat from last year, this survey actually showed a greater amount of confidence overall. Only 8% said they definitely were optimizing last year. Only 22% versus 30% said probably. Some of that may be in the sample size. Mark, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this. Who would be drawn to take a data-focused survey versus a broader technology survey? So we may have had people who were a little more comfortable in this world already, but same questions, same methodology, taken a year apart. I think it broadly shows that people know they need to get on board and understand data and digitize their businesses to compete in the future.
Yeah, and over a similar sample size too. These two studies have both had about between 300 and 400 operators. So that gets to a size in an audience like ours that really starts to, I think, reveal some significant differences. So I just think that there has been broadly some improvement in the industry in understanding and enthusiasm for data strategies.
Absolutely. And so using those optimizers, though, in this case, that the 25% from this most recent study that said they definitely optimize, who are they? What are they doing? What can we learn from them? So here you can see the 25% across all operators. You can see that they skew heavily towards chains and limited service. Fast casual really pops here as well. So a couple of the key findings that we found around these data optimizers were they skew towards chains and limited service. That's likely a byproduct of the fact that ordering and payment are often more heavily layered with technology, more off-premises business, less in-restaurant dining, less high-touch service with a server, where your personal and behavioral data wouldn't be baked into the transaction as much. So that's one thing we know about them, kind of who they are. They're skewing chains, skewing independence. They're more digitized across their businesses overall. They're also more likely to have good data. So we asked, how would you rate the overall quality of the data you're collecting? About half said decent. And if you add in the good, which was the highest choice you could make here, 71%, feeling pretty good. What's interesting here is when you look at those more data savvy, sophisticated businesses, again, that's that 25% who said definitely earlier in the study, nearly half of the data optimizer persona said their data was good versus 21% for the average operator. So I think that's a really powerful statement that data confidence stems directly from data quality. Oh, and I do want to point out too, we have on the other end of the spectrum, 30%, so nearly a third saying their data is poor or unusable. So essentially you have almost a third of operators in this study that just aren't even in the arena yet. They're not suited up for the game and they're not ready. So that I think shows that there's a lot of improvement for a big group of operators out there.
Definitely.
So one of the other key threads for these data optimizers, who's doing things well, is their businesses are more digital. So we asked, because that's where you're going to get quality information, either from sales, payment, and even within your operations. So it's measurable. It's kind of the step one is to digitize as much of your business as possible. So we asked what percent of sales are coming from digital touch points now in your business. Overall response was 31%. Where do you want to be by the end of 2025? There's a recognition that everyone wants to increase the number of digital touch points they have where they can capture more of this valuable data along the way. What gets interesting is when you break it down by segment a little bit. Again, you see the chains and limited service restaurants out ahead in terms of how digital they are now and how digital they want to be in the future. Again, ahead of independence, ahead of full service. Interestingly, in terms of percentage points, the growth that they want to see over the next couple of years is similar, but you have chains, limited service, over 50% in terms of their goals for digital touch points around their business. Independence and full service lagging, but that's partly a byproduct of where they started over there on the left-hand side. You can also see we layered the optimizers in at the bottom, and they're ahead of the pack across the board. So again, not only do they have better data, they're collecting more of it, and they understand that they're more digital now, and they need to be more digital in the future.
Yeah, the journey really doesn't ever stop. Just I guess until you get to 100% of sales from digital, right? So
exactly.
Even the folks that are already kind of on their way recognize that the way that things are going in the future is that the vast majority of sales are going to be coming from digital touch points. And I think that kind of goes with what kind of data sets people already collect. This first look at that, what sort of sources of customer data do you already look at, analyze, and try to use? The data sets that are kind of most common they tend to be the ones that are a little bit easier to collect and are a little bit more straightforward. And they're in place. Take a look at those top 4, in place and in use by about 2 in 5 operators currently. Now, online reviews and ratings, this is one that it'll pop up throughout this presentation and through our report, where it's very interesting because online reviews and things like ratings or comments on Google or Yelp, those are user generated, so you get a lot of them, and they're pretty easy to go find and collect. And they're sort of this qualitative data point that I think is really useful for telling the story throughout your brand and to your employees about what we're doing well and what we need to improve. But it is a little bit harder to operationalize, I think. And the data sets that really, I think, are more quantitative and sort of what you can kind of collect, sort and filter your strategies by are things like marketing campaign engagement, certainly loyalty programs and order histories from online orders. And I think the reason why there is because those are all sorts of things that, they can pair some sort of identifying metric. So, if you're in the loyalty program, we certainly know who you are, or we know your email address, or we know kind of your address from an online order. So there's a piece of identifying information and then what you do, what offers you redeem, what you actually order. So those are very, very useful. But when we look at what the data optimizers also use and collect, they're out ahead of the rest of the pack in a few, I think, pretty important ways. So certainly the orders that they would get from mobile apps or mobile web orders. And then further down, things like preferred payment methods or certain demographic information. You can use that to speed up transactions and remove friction from an order. And certainly with better demographic information, you can build a really robust persona and segments for your marketing. But look here at the top gold box there, which is what I really want to point out, which is our data optimizers so far have figured out ways to digitize every order, including ones that are happening in the store, either with a cashier or with a server. There are some ways that some are subtle and some are a little bit more straightforward, where we're asking them to take out their phone and do something with it. But there are ways to record a lot of customer order information and customer data when they're interacting in sort of a more analog human interaction. And we'll get to more of that from our panelists as well. So that was some of the customer data that you can collect. There's also some wider competitive data that is out there for a lot of operators. And again, we'll come back to what is the most straightforward thing that you can easily see, collect, and use, which is things like social media mentions and comments, and to a lesser extent, competitors' menu prices. I think that those are widely in use because really, any application or program just with a common web scraper can get this information for you pretty easily and likely can put it in a report or a dashboard that you can understand pretty easily. So I think that's why I think it's useful for us to look at where data optimizers are a little bit ahead of the pack. So the folks that are pretty confident that they are collecting the best data and using it, they are going to be out in front in terms of collecting and recording their service times, and then tying service times to the rest of the factors that they collect that they can look at, sort, and filter and view. So if we are running this campaign, what did that do to traffic, and what did that do to our service times? Similar to what they might do, on the menu. If they take certain slow sellers off, or if they, move things around on the menu, how is that going to affect service times? And they're also out in front too, and things like they record a lot more of their operating hours on video, and it's just, it's a more sophisticated thing, but it gives you a lot more to pair with the numbers coming from your POS or a customer relationship management platform. There's just the more that you can sort of put side by side, sort and filter, the more you can really figure out about what strategies are making the most sense and moving the needle for you in your business.
Yeah, that cause and effect.
And then finally, one of the last things that they asked about. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying that cause and effect is so interesting.
Sorry, Chris.
Talk about the how and the what coming together. We have who you are and what you did.
Yeah, and it's not just the data scientists and the CIO who's going to tell you that, what gets measured gets moved upon. Your operations folks will say that too. So this is a place where ops, marketing, technology, if we're all looking at the same data sets and working kind of from the same set of numbers, we can all work together on the right strategy for our businesses. And it goes all the way down to the actual digital touch points that we're offering our customers to order from us. And it's not just online ordering or mobile web. It can be something even as kind of sophisticated as generative AI and chatbots that might be assisting people at the drive-through. Now, granted, that's all the way down at the bottom of the list. It's a very kind of edge case. What we are seeing a lot more of throughout the industry, probably no surprise, is online ordering. And there's a difference between third-party and first-party online ordering. So am I self-operating my online ordering engine and my delivery offering, or am I working with maybe some of the third-party folks? And probably before 2020, this number for third-party would have been probably at more parity with first-party, or maybe even lower. And that's just something that we all kind of pivoted to during the pandemic, and you don't necessarily have to rip that out and take it off. You can always, de-emphasize it, throttle it back, but it's definitely there. Now,
Mark, I wanted to,
again,
can I add something, Mark?
Yeah.
On the third party, couple slides ago, in terms of what data they were collecting, and we compared the data optimizers, down at the bottom, kind of easy to miss, was the fact that the data optimizers are actually more likely to be getting data from a third party, which has been a real huge barrier and that's a big unlock for these more sophisticated businesses who maybe are leveraging the size of their businesses and larger chains and that kind of thing. But the how is a little bit unclear. But data optimizers are not only getting more data, but they're getting the harder to get data.
Yeah, or the more expensive to get, right?
Right.
And I think that the last part here, where we'll again point out where some of the early adopters of some of these higher order and more sophisticated solutions, where they're kind of out ahead, it makes sense that they might have more adoption of mobile apps and a catering platform, or self-order kiosks in the dining room or in the front of the house. Those are sort of good, I think, second steps once your online ordering offering is sort of built out. But right there in the middle, if you take a look at digital touch points for the loyalty program, the data optimizers are about 15 percentage points ahead. And that's very significant for a sample of this size. We're going to hear from our panelists about how we can do that. But if you start thinking about things like even when you're going to see your guests in the store, things like ordering ahead for rapid pickup, takeaway shelves and lockers for a transaction that started online or digitally, but then ended face-to-face with people coming in. Or if people are, kind of walking down the make line, ordering with your cashier in a limited service setting, but as they are paying for the transaction, they might scan something on their phone. So that way, it's just their way of identifying, hey, I'm a loyalty member. I'm here because I love this restaurant. I come back often. I'd like to be rewarded for my frequency. And so they sort of just check in for that transaction. Or you could do something, some sort of geofencing offer, some sort of digital exclusive. There are, lots of limited service chains that do a really good job of, if you want to come in and get this item that maybe we time on the app and come pick it up. So lots of really cool strategies, some overt, some subtle, for just digitizing more of your transactions, even the ones that are happening in store. That's a theme that really stood out to us and really jumped out at us. But, Christy, I think that another thing that we saw, and this of course makes sense, especially, more recently, it's a heavy lift in terms of costs. There are some barriers to investments. And the one that I think really jumped out is that among all the operators we talked to, 2 in 5 of them said, well, what might be holding us back from a data strategy that we'd like to implement and that we know we want to improve is that we don't necessarily have the right people in place. I don't have the right staff or enough people, or the folks that I have just don't have the skill set for what you're talking about here. And they might say, oh gosh, do I need to get a unit level, technology specialist? Well, Not necessarily, but this prevailing sense of I'm not sure I have the right people is what stood out the most. And it goes along with the 1 in 3 folks that say, well, I don't have the budget to invest in either platforms or people. And I think that leads to those next two things that we see. I can't necessarily collect all the data that I want to. Maybe I don't have the people, or I don't have the platforms, or it's really hard to analyze our data. And that really held steady across all of the different segments that we had among our respondents. It's not a chain versus independent problem or a limited service versus full service problem. It's kind of everybody feels this way. But where a really interesting segment difference did pop up is within this gold box you see is this notion of the difficulty and the importance of integration. Whatever systems that we have and that we pay to implement and put in our tech stack, it's really important that they play nice together, that they work interoperably. And it's not necessarily just the fact of there are data silos among, so there could be some interoperability issues among our tech partners. If I buy this solution for loyalty or labor management, does it necessarily integrate easily into the rest of my tech stack with my POS and other systems? That's one issue. The other issue is within our organization and all of the different solutions that we use, is every department working from the same data? If I pulled this report from the POS and update it, does everybody else see what I've kind of done with my reporting? And for the most part, chains and limited service restaurant respondents who tend to overlap the most with the data optimizers, so far they are more aware of this issue of integration and interoperability. But what that brings us to is, again, this is one of the biggest things that stood out to Christy and me when we got into the data, started writing this report, and really started analyzing what it all meant. We asked, well, where are you planning to invest in technology over the next 12 months? And if folks are saying that the labor issue is one of the biggest hurdles and impediments to data strategy, why are so few operators really looking to put their dollars into staff and into technology-focused and specialist staff for running these strategies in the next year? Fewer than 1 in 10 specifically said, yeah, I want to hire somebody specifically for all this. And so what that means is that we're probably going to be looking for technology solutions that can upskill and train and optimize the folks that we already have to implement the strategies that we want to implement. And I think that's why I'm so glad that we have such great people joining the panel today who are very specifically focused on this problem. And it's a big part of what they do, no matter the scope of their solution.
Yeah, I think, Mark, to your point, Mark, if you're not in a position to change your team, then maybe you need to change the way that the data is presented, what tools you're using, and kind of democratize it. Because you may find, if you play your cards right, that you already have the people you need, but that information needs to be integrated with your current tech stack. It needs to be accessible. It needs to be clear all the way down to the unit level team.
Yeah, the pressure on labor costs. The pressure on labor costs is only going up, right? So that's why if you're evaluating technology solutions, a big factor in your decision making needs to be, well, okay, how can we leverage this to get more out of our staff, and then maybe apply some downward pressure on labor costs with the technology that we procure. If you look at the different systems that people are planning to invest in over the next year, it's all very, very close together. There's no one single tier or category of solution that's getting the bulk of the investment and the interest. People are looking across the whole gamut out there, from just a very basic workhorse thing like a POS system to things that will help you with labor management, with inventory management. And down to the bottom there, again, technology-focused staff and integrations, APIs, making sure that everything is interoperable and working well together. Those are just a bit de-emphasized. And what that leads us to, again, is this question of how to architect and build your tech stack to work in the way that you need it to, based on what's best for your for your business. And so this is the old build versus buy question when it comes to technology, and software as a service. Very few people can really have the time, talent, and money to develop their own software and their own platforms for what they need. And so if it's going to be mostly focused on procuring and buying solutions that are going to help us, then the question becomes, okay, so do I buy fewer solutions from fewer, maybe bigger partners that are more kind of end-to-end? Or do you go the opposite direction, which is called a best of breed approach, where you might have a different app or solution for every specific case that you're trying to improve upon, but that increases your integration needs, right? You need to make sure that even more of your technology partners will work together and can have systems that use open systems APIs to work together. Nearly half of operators are kind of looking for, I would like a more end-to-end the box for me. And then only a third are taking the other approach of, well, for every specific case that I can think of, there's probably somebody who is maybe just starting up but has it really down pat and really has the coolest features for it. And here, a key difference of the data optimizers is that they are more focused on that best of breed approach, where they sort of are not scared off by the higher integration needs that come with that.
All right. So we've kind of figured out what's right for your business. How do you actually bring this down to earth, kind of where the rubber meets the road in the day-to-day of your business? What are you doing with the data that you collect? So we asked what data strategy would be most impactful for profitability. And you can see menu pops up at the top, although the next two show a real clear thread for labor. We actually color-coded these. You can kind of see 4 buckets emerge of where the focus is. The blue bars represent menu and kind of back of the house optimization. I see a really strong focus on labor and staff development. Those gold and yellow bars are going to be foundational to your digital marketing, your loyalty programs, and boosting your customer engagement. And then the white bars, that fourth area, is going to be kind of business facing, sales forecasting, increasing your revenue channels. So those are kind of the 4 key areas that we found the respondents were focused on. What are you monitoring to tell how you're doing? You'll see at the top a lot of really familiar kind of core KPIs that restaurants have been measuring for eons: food cost, sales and AUV, labor cost, check size. So those are still there. They're still important. Technology can make that more powerful, more nuanced. But where I think it gets interesting is a little further down the list. Some of the slightly lesser cited things here that we found in the report are going to be more tied to those more data savvy optimizers and are more kind of where we're headed. And if you want to skate to where the puck's going to be, that's what you need to be focused on. So I would cite repeat traffic from known customers. That known customer phrase is so key. The more you understand who they are, and to Mark's point earlier, what they do and how it ties together is going to be critical in terms of loyalty and keeping people coming back over and over. You also see lower down the list, but worth citing are some of the effective discount rate. Again, making sure that your customers are coming back and your loyalty program is effective beyond just a transactional discount approach. And then, of course, you see some familiar things like employee turnover and retention. And then finally, I would cite that average service times. We've seen, Mark, throughput come up in a few different ways so far of shortening your service times and kind of moving people through. So those are some key areas that are not at the top of the list because those foundational things are never going to go away. But the real nuance is a little further down this graph.
Mm-hmm.
So next, we're going to look at strategies that you've taken in the last 12 months. What moves are you making based on your data? Again, menus right at the top. You're adding or removing dishes, tweaking for maximum profitability. And so again, that's kind of Mark, we've talked about this a little bit. It's kind of that lever's right there. It's a little bit of low-hanging fruit because particularly for independents and Smaller businesses, you have total control over it. It's a little more clear. You get the information and you can act on it right away. And again, you can see that data optimizers and the overall operator population in our study, pretty par there. What's interesting is in this gold box where the data optimizers are ahead and what they're doing differently. And you see a few things kind of all around the business. They're doing a lot at the same time. They're focusing on staff. So you see training and motivating staff. You can see a focus on loyalty, more advanced loyalty programs, finding potential new customers, and then some operational things on purchasing and, again, speeding up transaction times. So those are some of the areas, if you think about what these operators that are out ahead in terms of data sophistication, this is what they're thinking about. As you add in a couple other cohorts just to see kind of what everyone's doing differently, chains and limited service are here, and there's a major overlap on those two. So this is not necessarily a comparison of two different groups, but just kind of to show these two cohorts that heavily overlap. Marketing, they're much more ahead of the pack on loyalty programs, finding and keeping and engaging new customers, re-engaging lapsed customers, A/B testing, and more sophisticated digital marketing. So that's where chains and limited service are out ahead of the pack. Meanwhile, independents and full service restaurants, who again are highly correlated in a lot of cases, they're focused on menu. So which can still be very effective. That is a huge lever that you want to be able to pull, but they're definitely lagging on some of the more sophisticated marketing that can come from better data.
Yeah, food costs are a real thing, but I think we're going to get into what really drives the top line here. When we talk about guest engagement in terms of data strategies, that's going to be a lot of digital loyalty programs. So we'll start just like earlier. We asked this question just of the operators that run digital loyalty programs. So a smaller subset of our sample here, and then the mean percentage of their sales that come from the loyalty program, more than a third. So that's still a pretty good base to build on. But their goal, it's a similar goal for growth like we saw with just digital sales in general. They're hoping to get above half of their sales from the loyalty program. It'll take probably mid double digit, somewhere in the teens growth rates over 2 years to achieve their goals. But what's interesting is that there are less wild swings among segment differences here. This is one place where, because this is among operators who already use loyalty programs, even if they are a full service restaurant or an independent who typically there are low rates of adoption, they have similar performance and goals to their counterparts, which is a little bit different from the slide we saw before about digital sales. Now, when you dig into what makes up a loyalty program, this was a really interesting slide to us. You can see that these are ratings of satisfaction for different parts of the loyalty program among users. And for the most part, most operators do find everything to be satisfying, mostly things like measuring the voice of the customer and data collection. They think that that's actually, they have those pretty good. But this question also asked, per each capability, if you don't find it satisfying, is it, unsatisfying, needing improvement, or is it just missing from your loyalty program? And so what we highlighted here are two things that, very few people say, I just don't have this capability. Of course you do. It's pretty foundational. So that's customer data collection, audience segmentation. Customer data collection, let's just say that there is still plenty of room for improvement across all the offerings out there. It's to be expected. I think that our industry is getting much more sophisticated in its use of data, so there's room for improvement there. On the audience segmentation piece, again, we would argue that it's foundational to digital marketing, driving the top line, that you know who your best customers are, you have personas and segments built out for them, so you know what plays to run with each group of customers. And so the fact that very few people are missing this capability, but almost 1 in 3 of users say, it needs improvement, I need help with this, that's a huge point that we wanted to point out. And it's also why we asked folks, what customer data sources or metrics are going into your customer segments? And what are you using to identify which customers need which marketing messages and offers and things like that. So broadly, you'll see after the qualitative piece of voice of the customer, the next three things that we see are frequency, spending, and recency, which I kind of intuit from engagement with marketing campaigns. Those kind of go into what a lot of chains will use to calculate what's called customer lifetime value. The customer lifetime value is really tricky. We'll hear from our panelists about it because they all have very great thoughts on it. And I will just say that I'm missing an animation here where we're going to point out the data optimizers. Closer to 1 out of 5 of them are using customer lifetime value in their segmentation plans. Chains and limited service respondents who, again, over-index for data optimizers, they are the ones that are over-indexing compared with everybody else using things like loyalty status and activity, customer lifetime value, and then some of the other data sources provided by partners. We do have the animation here for independence and full service. That will be corrected on the handout PDF that you get on demand after this webinar. Don't worry about it. Right now, independence and full service restaurants are a little bit more focused on kind of the easier things that are easier to collect and get in a reportable dashboard and look at. So again, online ratings, voice of the customer, and then marketing campaign engagement. So things like how many people open my emails, how many people click through, how many people redeemed offers that we sent out. All right, so that was our run through of the highlights of the report. I want to stop talking because I want to hear from our panelists. Christy's going to lead them through the first part of the Q&A, and then I'll be looking for questions from the audience. So everybody keep bringing the questions through, and Christy, take it away.
Here they come. All right. Welcome. We're excited to dive in and talk about this with all of you. Why don't you each, we'll go from left to right in the order on the slide, just a quick introduction of who you are and maybe a kind of 10-second description of your business and your approach. Ray, you want to start us?
Hey everyone, my name is Ray Gallagher. I'm the Vice President and General Manager for Olo's Engage product suite. Olo is a mission-critical platform for the restaurant industry. We are dedicated to delivering hospitality at scale, helping restaurant operators like yourselves driving sales both on and off premise, allowing you to do more and ultimately make every guest feel like a regular. We talked a lot during that presentation about LTV, and we'll get into it. For quick context, Olo is a platform across over 600 brands, 78,000 locations, 85 million guests transact 2 million orders a day. So we are at massive scale. And for the operators on this call, I want to emphasize one thing. The majority of your guests will not return after their first visit. So it is absolutely mission critical to put a data strategy together to harness that first party data. And I can't wait to get into it. Over to you, Emily.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Rugaber. I'm the VP of Marketing and Partnerships at Thanks. I'm super excited about this webinar because I get to nerd out on data. So just a little bit about me. Before I joined Thanks, I worked as a business intelligence consultant advising large enterprises such as Nestle, SAP, Target, Virgin America, and many more. On the off chance that you aren't familiar with Thanks, we are the fastest growing loyalty platform in the restaurant space. We are known for our frictionless guest experiences that result in more data capture for merchants, which is obviously top of mind for this group today. Thank you so much for having me on.
Excellent.
All right.
Raju?
Yes. Hi, I'm Raju Malhotra. Thanks, Mark and Christy and NRN for hosting this webinar and having us over. I am Chief Product and Technology Officer at PAR Technology, and my journey to PAR was through Punch, which is a loyalty software provider for restaurant industry for over 10 years. And PAR provides hardware and software solutions for restaurants of different sizes. I'm excited for this conversation and really looking forward to seeing how we can add some more context to the data that you've already seen. Justin?
Hey, yeah, thanks, Raj. Justin Buckley, I'm the CEO and president of Axial Shift. Originally founded with a few other guys, Hot Schedules, if you're familiar with that. And this is my new kind of venture. We started several years ago, and really we're looking to gamify and engage your team members and operators all the way through the executive team by kind of creating a new fun way of running challenges, driving strategic sales. We actually partner with Olo, looking with Thanks as well as PAR. So I'm very excited, and thank you to the NRN team for allowing me to be here.
Excellent. So let's dive in. I want to start, we covered a lot in those slides, but let's say, so before you can worry about integrations and analyzing, you've got to collect data, and you've got to collect the right data. So what would you recommend for an operator? Where to begin? What should they be collecting? What should they be focused on? Especially if they saw themselves on the wrong side of some of those the red slices on some of those pie charts. Ray, you want to tell us what you think operators should be focused on if they're kind of not sure where to begin and need to move on their data journey?
One rule to live by is ABC, always be collecting your guest data. At Olo, we're 100%.
Always be closing?
Always be closing business, but always be collecting your guest data. Thank you, Justin.
I'll be quiet, right? Sorry.
For context, Justin and I worked together for about a decade at Hot Schedule, so really cool to see him here as well. But yes, so all the digital touch points are sort of a given when you're collecting data. At Olo, we are focused on driving 100% digital, so that's just something to kind of always keep in mind as far as your general strategy. I wanted to highlight, I would say probably maybe some underutilized, underrepresented sort of ways to collect data. One is your credit card processor data, and two would be, I'll give you an example for on-premise. Wi-Fi data collection is actually a low-key way to collect guest data in a way that provides value to them by providing them a service, but ultimately you're able to take and build a guest profile, match that, for example, to a credit card payment, and then start to derive with the right tools that guest's lifetime value, their behaviors, and start to think about how to hyper-personalize.
Excellent. Coming after that, Emily, I'd love for you to jump in, especially ending on that idea of hyper-personalization and understanding your customer. That's what you're all about. So what do you think that operators should be focused on if they either want to get better or really need to get started on all this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think federating data certainly holds promise in the restaurant industry. But today, the most reliable way to collect data is through loyalty. In the future, with advancements like kiosk and voice ordering at drive-through and, bring your own device, we're absolutely going to get closer to that concept of digital entirety that Ray mentioned. At Thanks, in collaboration with Olo, we truly believe in that future state. In reality, though, I think restaurants are pretty far away from that. Most of their revenue, as you pointed out, Mark, is still coming from guests physically visiting the restaurant. Those digital optimizers are really leaning into loyalty as well, as you pointed out. And I think that's because loyalty is the only proven mechanism to track and drive repeat purchasing from guests on the broad scale. And, you've got McDonald's and you've got Chipotle and some others who were initially hesitant to adopt loyalty programs. And they've jumped on the bandwagon, and they now have some of, the fastest growing data capture rates out there. There's this real sort of shift that's happening, I think, from loyalty being kind of this nice to have to being a must have. And, it's not just the result of a more competitive dynamic within the restaurant industry. It's also the emergence of the third-party delivery services that have 100% data about 100% of customers. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the importance of optimizing digital channels for data capture. I think there's a misconception in the industry that enrolling guests into loyalty is sort of counter to enabling a really seamless user experience, and it's simply not true. I think the devil's in the details on this one in terms of excellent user experience design. The best user experiences they're really intuitive, they're convenient, they're frictionless, but they're also optimized for data capture. Which is why we're seeing those digital optimizers with more digital data being sort of like in the leader of the pack. And then the last thing I'll say is that, Thanks, when we convert from legacy loyalty programs, the number one thing that stands out is just how low those capture rates are. And I think on this dimension, Thanks is well above the crowd with, really high capture rates, well above the 30% average.
Mm-hmm. Hey, so excellent. Emily, quick question. Sorry for jumping in.
I love it.
Emily, Ray, or Raju, and I'm curious is, one of the things we're seeing is how do we tie all this together, right? To give operators the best view across the entire organization. You have loyalty, you have labor, you have inventory. So I just wanted to get y'all's opinion on, tying all this information together to deliver it to an individual, which is what we're trying to do. In a whole sense. What's y'all's thoughts about bringing all this information together?
I can take a crack at it. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, maybe I can tee you up, Raju. I think we focus deeply on building out a guest data platform for that very reason of like collecting all the different sort of sources of for example, loyalty data, order data, credit card, et cetera, it goes on and on, bringing that all together onto what I would consider to be a 360 view of your guest to start building out predictive analytics of what is the behavior, where is it headed? So rather than sort of be reactive, how can you get proactive and start to put that to work? And Raju, maybe you can jump in from there.
Yeah. So actually, I think at the end of the day, a data-driven restaurant, let's not forget, is still a restaurant, right? So the basic of the business around food quality, service, ambiance, menu items, pricing, all those factors are very important to actually keep in mind as we think about, data capture, data transparency. So I think just into your question, having an intention to what actually is the 80-20 of that data is actually very important. So to me, I think the best kind of data, which I would, agree with everybody else is, from the guests who actively share their data with the brands they love. And I think that's where thinking about it as, effectively a B2C CRM, right? We've actually pretty used to B2B CRM, but really that's where the idea of having a guest profile through multiple interactions, but really customer identity or guest identity, I think is the great unifier of a lot of noise in the system. So not collecting data for the sake of collecting data, but being really focused on the high quality guest provided data, be it first party through the transactions, be it zero party, which is, here are my dietary preferences, here's what I like, what I don't like. I think that teeing it together as a customer profile and making it available to the operators so they can act on it. I think that really is a game changer. And that's the journey I think that would help us actually be a better restaurant owners and really provide that service to the guest through the right type of employees and systems and processes.
Got it.
Excellent. One thing I want to follow up on when we talk about what you're collecting and how to apply it, but tying back to some of the labor question and do I have the right people? Who should have access to it? What does it look like? Justin, I want to tee you up because that democratization of data and getting it in people's hands and making it understandable and usable and even fun is a big philosophy for you. So can you tell us a little bit more about that and how operators can learn from that?
Yeah, and I appreciate that. That's actually where I was about to go. So you have guests, excuse me, you have guests, right? But you have the people that take care of the guests. And they need to understand where they sit and currently from a benchmarking standpoint, they need to understand how they can improve. So I look at it more from you take care of your team, they take care of the guests. But the team members nowadays don't really get the information, or at least in my opinion, that they really need. How many people know SPLH? How many people know GPLH? But if you can deliver it to the right person at the right time, I think that's crucial within the organization, which then turns into what Ray and Raju, and I know Emily would comment the same, is guest experience. But if they don't have the information, they don't understand what they're trying to do, how they can improve, I think it's a challenge. So getting information to the hourly team member and the operators, I think is crucial. And I think it's a struggle. You can run a bunch of reports, you can do a bunch of VLOOKUPs, but why don't we just give it to them in a way they're used to looking at it, like Snapchat or whatever the case may be. I just think you have to get it to the right people so they can learn and improve as much as possible. And I apologize, I'm a little under the weather.
Sorry to hear that. No, you sound great. So in terms, we talked a little bit about integration, and you can have the best data in the world, but if it doesn't fit with what you're working with, if it's not accessible, usable, shareable, it's not going to move the needle for you. So let's talk a little bit about, Mark cited that build versus buy question. We have a lot of people being drawn to multiple solutions. Even if you have some big partners that can do a really comprehensive set of skills, you're going to have multiple things that need to integrate in your tech stack. How do you do that? How do you make sure that data can talk to each other across systems? As you're vetting new technologies, what should you be looking for to make sure that you're not going to paint yourself into a corner?
So many of our, I think, customer conversations that I can share my sort of perspective, because there is a, the tension between capability and flexibility, right? Capability is about, I want to get the best of breed capabilities, and then do I actually get it from a quote unquote all-in platform that gives me the flexibility, or is there a choice? I actually, this is one of the common questions as we talk to different brands. And I would say at the end of the day, you really want both. You want to have your cake and eat it too. And the way to check if someone, the partner that you're working with, actually provides the right level of interoperability, because openness is key. I think your data showed you want to get the interoperability. It's not binary though, because everybody says they're interoperable and open. It's actually a degree of interoperability that is key. And one of my suggestions is, I know this sounds a little bit, maybe too technical for some of the customers directly we're talking to, but they have a tech team, they have a partner. Go check out the developer portal for the vendor that you're working with. Do they have open, well-documented APIs that are freely available for you to check it out? And your developer, your IT team, your partners can actually validate that for you. So I think at the end of the day, that's where the integrations come in. And as part, we provide 500 plus integrations out of the box, but thousands of other integrations that are possible because of the open API platform that we offer. And I would just say it has to be very transparent to anyone making a decision to go check it out versus relying on someone's word.
Yeah, just to double down on that, I think operators need a flexible, platform with options, whether it's going native, with the platform or choosing best of breed. You need to have that flexibility. And I totally agree that doing a little bit of homework to Raju's point, going, geeking out a little bit just to see what's available, see what, folks are saying. And ultimately, are they putting their investment and their money where their mouth is, not just tell you, but let me show you. But flexibility is absolutely key to unlock as much data flowing into your system as possible to make better decisions, to Justin's point, better empower your staff. From our angle, it's constantly thinking about how you can, collect as much data as possible to enrich a guest profile to ultimately drive their lifetime value, which is meaningful for a restaurant as a leading indicator for your business.
Yeah, and I can
Emily, I'd love for you to jump in if you'd like to talk a little bit about, either what you should be looking for as you're vetting new technologies in terms of partnerships and integrations, or if we want to jump right into that customer lifetime value, because that was kind of next on my list to talk about, and I'd love to talk about those key metrics that really help you create those profiles that are going to move the needle in terms of customer engagement.
Yeah, I can talk about either one of those two things. I guess I'll say I agree with Raju and Ray for sure. Full-throated endorsement of what they said. Best of breed can work. Consolidation can work. You need to work with a provider who offers an open data ecosystem, and I love the idea of looking at the developer portals to see what their APIs look like and have your tech team sort of vet it that way. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of times it's not always clear to restaurants why this matters. Like, what is the difference between a provider that does bespoke point-to-point integrations every single time versus a provider that's looking at it from the perspective of sort of the open data ecosystem? And I think it matters because integrations are going to be stood up in weeks instead of months or years. You're going to see that those integrations are regularly improved upon and innovated on. You're going to see that your loyalty program can be adjusted regularly. You don't have to call your account manager every time you want to change your tiers program. You can do it yourself in real time. You can monitor your costs and make changes to the program to drive down your effective discount rate in real time in sort of a self-service way. You can do things like A/B testing to see if you really need to give that $3 coupon, or if a $1 coupon is going to work the same way. Another one is the speed of innovation around reporting. If reporting in the product is regularly being updated and you're seeing new reports and new filters and new visualizations every other week versus, every other month or worse. And of course, as you said, marketing is going to become more personalized, and you're going to be able to do it at scale. I mean, anyone can run, multiple campaigns to an audience by manually dividing up the audience, but can you do that at scale regularly, and automate as much as possible? So those are sort of some of the things that I think this more modern approach enables.
Excellent. Mark, I want to see if there's any good stuff from the audience questions that we want to bubble up, or we can keep talking. I could do this all day with this panel, but if there's anything that you want to flag for them, I'd love to take that time now.
I do, yeah. We may need to do a bit of a speed round here, but there are some good things to get through. So a couple of attendees have asked about AI, generative AI. And we're wondering if you guys have an opinion on what some of the, maybe best use cases to look for in prospective technology might be, whether it's, if it's going to help me with marketing copy or menu descriptions. I talked to somebody else who is really excited about generative AI for conversational reporting. What are some things that you guys have kind of on your roadmap or on your radar about generative AI in hospitality technology?
I can take a crack. I think there are 3 cases we have seen emerging. One is about marketing, copy, engagement, smart segmentation, send time optimization. Second one is about support type of cases, where how can we actually, a lot of agents that get some questions from customers about their program. And the third one, I think, is that assistance based on the BI data. So instead of writing a SQL query, you can actually query in a natural language. So those are marketing, support, and BI. Those are the 3 almost immediate use cases that we've seen of Gen AI.
Yeah, just plus one to those, and it's exciting to be able to see these tools already available in many products. And a co-pilot or creative assistant for marketing is incredible. You get writer's block, you need to be able to keep things moving along. I think that's exciting to see that in products today. And I think on the reporting front, just being able to write a sentence, say, I want to see a report like this, and then have the AI actually go and figure out how that actually maps to the report that you want to see. That's very interesting and exciting, and where we definitely see things going. And I'd love to hear from the rest of the group. I don't know, Justin, do you have anything on the AI front?
I have some things I can talk about. I can't talk about them all. But yeah, so we're actually doing, we're a little more in the in-house, how's your team members doing? How's your operators doing? How's your corporate doing? So we're a little different. But we have been doing AI for analysis on pictures, as well as wording from a logbook and a messaging standpoint, to be able to create a sentiment score across your organization through, based on what people are saying, what people are messaging. Is this place good, bad, whatever the case may be. Is it also can analyze pictures. Actually, Olo was one of the ones that one of our customers uses. They take a picture of the Olo screen, and then it analyzes it, breaks it down, and then creates a report for the corporate office. I'm not sure why they're taking pictures, but they are. So Ray, just FYI. Yeah, and then the other thing that we're seeing is the ability to detect turnover based on how their demeanor is, what they're doing, are they showing up? And the AI basically analyzes all of it and then gives a breakdown. We haven't released it, but those are the 2 things that I can speak to that we're really looking at right now.
That's great, Justin. We're actually getting tight on time, so I want to wrap up with a quick kind of rapid fire for any operators in the audience who are kind of like, well, what can I do now? What can I do tomorrow in my business? What should I be focused on? So if you could leave each of you with, one thing that they could do today to get started in the right direction, or one kind of magic metric that they should be focused on measuring and tracking and improving over the next year? What would you choose? Let's start with Ray.
So lifetime value is an absolute North Star metric, and engaging your guests that are lapsing is like low-hanging fruit, table stakes, something that if you're not doing today, you should be. And by the way, your loyalty program is really a critical part of that, but I will also just highlight that often 70, 80% of your guests aren't in loyalty, making sure you are finding ways to engage with those guests to bring them back in. Again, the majority of your guests are not coming back after your first visit. Put that data to work, start to bring them back in.
Excellent. Raju, you want to go next?
Yeah, so I think data is a good guidepost, but at the end of the day, having a customer 360 or guest 360 view is important. I agree. I think loyalty is really that force multiplier. And the one thing I would leave with is recency, frequency, and monetization of that guest is the leading indicator of how your business success is, business health is, and the loyalty of that guest. So recency, frequency, and monetization measurement, especially at a profitable level, would drive the right kind of behaviors.
Excellent. Emily?
Yeah, I was going to say, and no one's going to like this answer, but it kind of depends. It depends on where you are in your journey to become more data-driven. I see it as sort of like two different realms. There's, you have to collect data, you have to get good at that. And then once you have data, you got to figure out how to make it really actionable. And if you're still struggling with the first part, then you need to solve that problem. Like I said, we see a lot of brands who are really struggling with their capture rates, getting enough people into the loyalty program. It doesn't matter how good your loyalty program is if you're only capturing 5 or 10% of your revenue. And so if you have a data collection challenge, then you got to focus on that. You got to figure out how you can get more people into that funnel. And then if you're lucky enough to have really healthy capture rates and you're seeing a lot of known guests, then trying to figure out how to activate them. As I can't remember who said it, but most customers in the loyalty program aren't active. How do you get them activated? How do you get them to that first, second, third purchase? And then once they're engaged, how do you actually drive that incremental behavior change? How do you drive up their average monthly value and retain more of your guests?
Excellent. And Justin, lastly, you mentioned focusing on the things that lead to retention. But you want to expand on that, or if you have one other key takeaway for the audience today?
No, sorry for giggling. So this is why I partner with Emily and Ray and Raju and multiple other companies. We go from a different approach, which is if you take care of your team members from a retention standpoint, then you get to hit what Emily and Ray and Raju is talking about, right? Which is you want one person to come in 2 times versus 1. You want the person that comes in 2 times a month to come in 4 times a month, right? So it's this repeat business, which drives the restaurant industry, in my opinion. So, my opinion would drive more towards make sure your team members are in the right place. They get data from multiple places, but if they're 18, let them see it differently than we see it. If they're, everyone doesn't want to look at data the same way. So that's what we're really driving towards, and I think is extremely valuable. As soon as data actually makes no difference, to be honest with you, if no one knows how to translate it.
So it's got to look like TikTok, right?
Exactly. It needs to be a little video, and it needs to be less than 1 minute long.
Love it.
Yeah.
Well, that is all the time we have today. I think we could probably keep talking for another hour. There's so much here and so many great insights, but we do need to wrap up. You can find the full report at nrn.com/data-driven restaurant. It includes all the stuff that Mark and I presented, as well as much more graphs and analysis and data, if you will. And then it also includes some insights from our panelists today. So I want to thank them again for their time. Thank our sponsors, Olo, Thanks, PAR, and Axial Shift. Mark, anything else before we sign off?
No, I had a lot of fun, and looking forward to talking more in the green room when we wrap up.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks all.